So this will be part 2 to Bart Ehrman Interrupted, because I'll just finish the video because it gets even... I shouldn't have stopped it there. I was going to do it for time, but I left off the best part.
There's a different perspective on who Jesus was, depending on which gospel you happen to read. I deal with historical problems of knowing what Jesus actually said and did. The historical problem of knowing how it is we got these 27 books in the first place and not some other collection of Christian writings. This is all material that scholars have been talking about for 200 years, yet oddly enough, it's material that people simply don't know about. I often get asked to give talks in churches, and one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, why have I never heard this before? Well, the reason is because scholars haven't done a very good job in communicating their information more broadly. This book is designed to help people on all levels, whether people in the church or people on the street or anybody simply interested in the Bible, to help all people understand better what scholars have been saying about the Bible for the past 200 years.
So he repeats it twice, what Bible scholars have been saying about the Bible for the last 200 years. Why don't I know about this? Because you never bothered to find it out. I mean, the first thing that when I read, first time I ever read the New Testament, and part of it is, how do we know this person wrote that? Or I noticed an immediate difference in the pastoral epistles to the rest of Paul. I actually rather liked the pastoral epistles more than Paul. I saw a huge difference between Matthew and Luke. And then John, the Gospel of John, I was convinced was written by Paul. And it, not many people know that we have writings of other people around that time, and of people who were active in the Christian community just after this apostolic age, as it's called. Answering the questions of, I think you said, trying to figure out why these 27 books were in. Well, the East, we will not read the Apocalypse of John in church. It just will not be read. Why did it make it into the canon, and something like the Didache or the Epistle of Barnabas didn't? They read the Didache and the Epistle of Barnabas actively. They read these other books. Proto-Evangelium of James, this was read. All these other books are read, right? And didn't mean they were any less inspired or anything like that. Using a very loaded word there. Didn't mean they were any less... they had to be straight from of apostolic origin and revelatory. Basically, from the first period, from this first Christ and the Apostles period, and they had to be revelatory. That's what made it into the Western canon. And the canon was only the things that, this is what we have certified to be read in church. This is what's okay to be read in the liturgy. This is what's okay. Antioch, for hundreds of years, they didn't have, 2nd and 3rd John and 2nd Peter, no way. Didn't have it. Wasn't going to be in there. The oldest codices that we find have the Epistle of Barnabas in it in the Didache. Also have things like 1 Clement. Shepherd of Hermas. Does that mean they were part of the canon? No. The canon didn't come at Nicaea. People can point to Athanasius' letter of 367 A.D. is his pastoral letter, A.D. 367. His 39th Paschal letter, where they could point to, I think it's the Second Council of Carthage that the West has in 415. The fact is that from the very beginning, you're reading the Church Fathers, people, Clement writing in 98 A.D. Ignatius of Antioch from 105 to 115. He's writing. This whole period where these people are writing, and they're quoting stuff. We have this fragment from the 2nd century called the Moratorian Canon, where it lists the stuff that we know about, the good stuff, the books that we know, the authentic, the spurious, and the anti-legomena, or the disputed. Not anti-legomena, that's the wrong word. Disputed. So you have authentic, disputed, forged, or forged is the wrong word because there was no such thing back then. False writings. The Apocalypse makes it into two categories. Disputed, I believe it lists 2nd, 3rd John, Jude. I want to say Hebrews, but I don't think that, because Hebrews gets quoted very early on. But Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we don't know who wrote out this Moratorian Canon, and has the Apocalypse of Peter in disputed. And the Apocalypse of Peter was just as popular as the Apocalypse of John for a while. Then you get to Ignatius Irenaeus of Lyon. He actually mentions there's 4. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, he's writing this in southern Gaul, modern-day France. There's another guy, Tatian, around the same time, or possibly a little bit earlier, in Syria. I say Syria, but it's Syria / modern-day Iraq, because that was Syria. That put together this thing called the Diatessaron, where it was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all kind of harmonized together. And then you get this other guy, Papias, who's even earlier than them. Says, Mark, that was the teachings of Peter. First time I heard that, I go, that makes sense. That, read Mark. I mean, you guys know, if you read Mark, this is not a professional writer. Obviously, that the last third is much earlier, and actually most scholars, I think even Bart Ehrman would place last third of Mark to be within a few years of the crucifixion. And then you have this thing, I think I counted 36 times within the first 2 chapters that the word immediately comes up in Mark. It's just hastily done, and it has to be before 69 AD, all right? But that was the preachings of Peter, so it was somebody who knew Peter, or who was taught by him, or heard, him speak, or actually was interactive when doing, writing a rough copy of this, or maybe the Passion narrative was written by Peter, written meaning he had a scribe, and then it goes through. Luke was a physician who, followed around Paul. Matthew was a tax collector, and John is the Apostle John. It goes through this, and the weird thing is that modern day people look at Luke, people who don't even know who Pius is, and go, there's a lot of medical words in here, stuff like that. So the New Testament it wasn't just formed somewhere. It certainly wasn't at Nicaea. Nicaea had nothing to do with the New Testament. But they pretty much already knew. There was only a few books up for debate by I would say the end of the 3rd century, but heck, by the end of the 2nd century, there were only a few books up for debate. And those are what are known as the Catholic epistles. And not even all of them. I mean, 1 John was a big one that was definitely in. The 1 Peter was in. But the rest of what's known as the Catholic epistles were iffy, and certainly the Apocalypse was disputed or false. You know, it was in 2 categories. Actually, I think it was in authentic and false. I think those are the 2. I don't even think it was in dispute. I think it was just, it's either or. But yeah, we know where it comes from. Now, the common schlub sitting in a pew who doesn't give a crap, who doesn't care about history or care about how the Bible's formed. Yeah. But like you said, modern scholarship for the last 200 years knows all this stuff. And guess what? Every Bible scholar knows exactly the same stuff Bart Ehrman knows. There's no huge... If you just knew what Bart Ehrman... Like you get from weird, uneducated atheists or uneducated Muslims trying to aha you with Bart Ehrman stuff. People like me just shake our heads and go, "You're... what?"